Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good Wednesday morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. We're so glad that you tuned in. It is June 19th, 2024. And we are here today to help you be a good steward with everything that God has given you. If you're a partner of the ministry, make sure you tune in today for our partner conference call coming up a little bit after the show at noon Central Time. You should have gotten an email already giving you the information on how to call in. If you didn't get that email and you're a partner, log in, go to the conference call page, and you should find that information right there. So today we're going to talk about more financial issues, helping you put Christ at the center of your portfolio and to be a good steward with everything the Lord has given you. Speaking of being good stewards, our stewardship verse of the day today comes from Proverbs 16:9. The heart of a man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Seth, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a great reminder for us, Shana, and I think especially so when we consider the fact that God's will is sovereign. For Christians out there who are wondering, can I fall outside of God's sovereignly ordained will? The answer is a resounding no, you cannot. Just ask the Apostle Paul, who was a chosen instrument of God's sovereign will. But still, Shana, to be faithful stewards with the money God's given to us, we need to use wisdom in planning what we must do for God's glory. So we trust that God's sovereign will be accomplished, but we also are confident that we're commanded in Scripture to be obedient, and one of those acts of obedience is using wisdom with the resources God has given to us. And so that's one of the things that we should do, is asking the right questions about what to do with the money that God has given to us. And one of those questions we get often on this show is this question: how do I discern when I am ready to invest? And I think that involves a lot of wisdom there. I think this is a good place for us to start, Shana. How does a person who wants to invest know when he's actually ready to do it?
Yeah. So we don't want to fall into that old trap that Satan tried to trap Jesus with when he was in the desert, encouraging him to do crazy things, to jump off the temple and, things like that, and to test God. So we don't want to fall into those kind of traps either. And we do want to use godly wisdom in count the cost and all of those things, and knowing when we're ready to invest. So some very practical things, signs that you are ready to invest, is that you've already established a budget that enables you to live within your means. Now that means that you live on what is left after you've been obedient and given the Lord what is his and what he has asked of you, after you've paid Caesar what is due to him, and after you have reserved some money for emergencies and for your future.
Yeah, that's good, Shana. And so kind of to continue this even more, what goals should we be looking to hit for ourselves before we consider investing? So making sure that we have all our ducks in a row, what are some things that we should be looking for? Should we have that house or the 3-month emergency? What do you think?
Well, you should definitely have at least 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund saved up. It just depends on, how easy it is for you to find other income. So, for example, if you're a teacher or a healthcare professional and you lose your job, you might have a pretty time finding a new job. So, you may need less money in reserves. If you have a really specialized kind of job, or if the economy gets worse and unemployment climbs, you may want to have a bigger cushion so that you're able to really take time and find that next job. And, not everyone has the same calling or the same path. So there's not really a cookie cutter strategy that everyone needs to adhere to. We should seek God's plans for our lives and see what kind of financial goals we should set accordingly. Some people have a path or a calling to get, and they need a higher education. Some people are called to trade, some to marriage, some to singleness, some to ministry, some to marketplace, some to military. So a calling to the ministry or to military might not be conducive to home ownership right away. If you're going to be moving around a lot, it takes an investment to get into a home. That typically takes a little bit of time to recover. Or current conditions might not present the right opportunity for home ownership, at least not right now. So you might need to be putting some money back. In fact, I came across a recent survey that says 86% of consumers right now say that it is a bad time to buy a home. Well, the factors contributing to that opinion are that home prices in the U.S. have skyrocketed. The median home price is now just shy of $400,000.
Man.
Just since President Biden took office, home prices are up between 30 to 35%. The 30-year mortgage has been hovering around 7%. That's 130% higher, the mortgage rate, 30-year mortgage rates, 130% higher than it was at the beginning of the Biden administration. So at the end of the Trump administration, we saw 30-year mortgage rates dip below 3%. So they're more than double what they were at that time. So this brings the monthly mortgage payment for a home in that price range to over $2,800 a month. So inventories of homes have shrunk. People are not putting their houses on the market because of those proverbial golden handcuffs that we speak about. 80% of homeowners with a mortgage have rates below 5%. So they're not wanting to trade in their 5% or less mortgage for a 7% mortgage, especially with home prices 30% higher than what they were. So for some, renting is the only affordable choice at the moment, but rents have also been on the rise. The average or the median housing rent increased 0.8% in May to $1,653. That's the highest since 2022.
So it's good to count the cost for sure.
Yeah.
The lesson that we're learning here. That's great, Shana. Let's continue this here. Just talk about some of the potential dangers of kind of commingling our investment dollars with the dollars we've put away for savings or for emergencies. I've heard you talk in the past, Shana, about separate buckets. Could you explain that to our audience?
Yeah, so I think that's important. When you invest, there's a difference between investing and saving. So saving, your goal is really for stability of principal. You want to earn a little bit of interest that you can, if you can, but you don't want to take a lot of market risk with that because you never know when you're going to need that. And with investing comes increased risk of market volatility. So the worst thing that can happen is that you have your savings actually invested and the value is down when you need to get to it and you're forced to lock in a loss and it didn't turn out as you had planned at all. So we really don't want to be forced to liquidate investments when a time where they could be down in value. So it's really important to have those different buckets, savings bucket, investment buckets, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's good. How about for our target, Shana? Is there a dollar amount we should have targeted that, say once we have this amount ready to invest? So say we have our ducks in a row, we don't have any debt, we've got our emergency savings, and now we're looking for the amount of money that we want, that we are intentionally putting into investing. How much should that be?
Well, I think there's actual scriptural support for working with percentages rather than dollar amounts. So, the scripture talks to, and I guess it's a controversial topic, but, a tithe is 1/10. So 10% is how you should look at this, working with percentages rather than dollar amounts. So unless there is like a hard, fast minimum for a particular investment, then I believe that you should adopt a dollar cost averaging approach and just put that money to work, as it becomes available. I don't think we have time to really wrap up this thought. So let's go to break, and then we're going to come back with more financial issues. We'll finish up this conversation and get to some partner and listener questions. Don't go anywhere. We're taking a break, but we'll be back with more financial issues right after this.
In the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
And we're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common, the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Thanks for joining us on Financial Issues, folks. Shana and I are talking about this concept, teachable moment today, of how to discern when we're ready to invest. And, I do understand we have a lot of people out there who are already investing. So, Shana, maybe a follow-up to this is, kind of once we get to that dollar amount we have for investing, is it wise for us to put it all to work at once or to take it piece by piece? What would you say to that?
Well, if you're in a systematic saving kind of program, like let's say it's your 401k, or you have a systematic investment setup where, every 2 weeks when you get paid, you have money that goes into your investment account, then it's good just to put that money to work. Now, if you're coming from a different situation, let's say maybe you have come into a sum of money. Maybe you got an inheritance, or maybe you changed jobs and you're rolling over your employer-sponsored plan into an individual plan where you then get to make your own investment decisions, then you should take a dollar cost averaging approach. Get that money deployed maybe over a 6 to 9 month period. So, really a lot of different ways that you can get money to work. Timing the market has proven itself to be a very ineffective strategy time and time again. So
absolutely.
If you're right about to be right about time in the market, you have to be right about when to get out, when to get in. And those are two decisions that it is very statistically unlikely that you're going to be right about most of the time.
Absolutely. Shana, speaking of time, actually, and the market, though this is not timing the market, this is just those two concepts together, is there a time of day that's best for us to consider when we put new money to work? I know it might be getting into the weeds a little bit, or what about even a time of year as well? Is there a specific time that tends to work better to get that return?
No, I think trying to time the market is a really bad idea.
Yep.
So, for most people, we're busy. We don't get to the luxury of sitting in front of a computer all day long. And, it just becomes emotionally nerve-wracking to try to do that. So, get the money to work. It's, when you look down the road 10 years, it's not going to matter if you got in or in the high or the low of the day. It's going to be a very small impact.
Yeah. So having much more of a big picture outlook is going to be a lot better for us. That's
absolutely
good. How much of this, Shana, depends on external factors? We talk about these often on the show. Government spending is one of them. Inflation is one of them. Earnings reports, different things like that. How much of those should we keep an eye on, and how much of this depends on it?
Well, we shouldn't worry about anything because Scripture tells us not to, but we should be aware of the things that are the factors that are influencing investment. So government spending is what's driving inflation. So as long as we have the government just spending money out of control, printing new money, having the Fed monetize that debt, we're going to have a problem with inflation. So, stocks have traditionally been the antidote for inflation because you need growth to combat inflation. For example, if inflation's increasing at 3% and we were in an environment like we were in for decades with, cash only earning less than 1%, you're in a losing situation if you're in cash and you're earning 1% and inflation is rising at 3%. So stock has traditionally been the antidote for inflation because it has historically higher rates of growth than, say, cash. So I believe that the government is going to continue to spend money, and I believe that that this trend will happen until it doesn't. So one way that we can put an end to it is to put pressure on the people in office and make our voices heard in the ballot box.
Amen. It's good stuff there, Shana. I know we had some economic data to get to here. We had a number that came out yesterday.
Yeah. I wanted to add a couple more thoughts, to company success is also limited by government regulations and taxes. So, those are things that we don't seem to have a lot of control over. The government makes those decisions, but we indirectly influence that in the with our ballots as well. The more control that the government grabs over businesses and the distribution or the redistribution of wealth that we hear them talking about often, the harder it's going to become to grow and retain wealth. So it is an election year. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but I'm going to tell you what the issues are. And we've got some major issues.
Amen. Yeah, sure do.
Well, speaking of financial issues, we got the retail sales number that came out. It's a pretty slow week this week for economic data, but we did get retail sales out yesterday. Retail sales in the U.S. edged up 0.1% month over month for May of 2024, following a downwardly revised 0.2% fall in April. That was below forecast of a 0.2% increase. So this is another sign that consumer sentiment is cooling. We're seeing a very mixed picture when it comes to the consumer, with consumers on the lower end of the income spectrum really starting to show signs of struggling. If we dig into that number a little bit deeper, the core retail sales in May were a little bit softer than expected. They rose 0.4% month over month, 1/10 less than what was anticipated, but off of a lower estimated base, as April core number was revised lower as well. Year over year, core retail sales up 3.1%, which is sort of comparable to the 5-year average leading into COVID of 3.6%. So lighter than what we were used to. Inflation, though, is rising by a similar amount as retail sales are rising, so there's not really any real consumer spending growth. That's not a great thing for an economy that is consumer-driven. Well, let's get to some partner questions.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it, Shana. Judy is up first here. She's 59 years old. Regarding the latest 2 fixed income options, she mentions FI2 and FI3. It states FI2 is to be considered if owned in a taxable account in a state that collects income tax. So this would not be a buy for Texans or the handful of 7 other states that do not collect income taxes. Is that true? We should continue purchasing CDs, and does the same rule apply to FI3? What do you think, Shana?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about this a little bit more on the partner conference call today, so you're not going to want to miss that. Tune in at noon Central Time. But to answer Judy's question, one of the considerations there is that if you live in a state that collects state income tax and you're invested in treasuries, then you get to exclude some of that interest for your state income tax purposes. So Judy, I guess, lives in the great state of Texas or another state that doesn't collect income taxes. In that case, I would just say compare CDs to treasuries. Rates are changing all the time. So as you're going through your ladder, I would just take a look. If you need a 24-month fixed income investment, let's just say, compare what you could get in a CD to a treasury and go with a higher rate.
Awesome, Shana. That's great. Next one we have here is Andy. Andy is 48, and he's wondering about FI 68 regarding fixed income. I'm holding money in the C fund rather than the A fund. Now, Fidelity will not let me exchange due to fund being outside fund family. Should I sell my long-term position in the C fund and buy the A fund? And then he has a follow-up about the difference between those two shares, the A share and the C share. Shana, what do you think?
Okay, so there's a description that we have written out for partners. If you want to refer back to that, I'm going to answer the question, but if you want to go back and get more detail on it, just go to the mutual fund buy list page, and there at the top you'll see the difference between A and C shares. So an exchange can only happen within the same fund family. So the mutual funds that we like are the Timothy plan because they're biblically responsible. So if you have Timothy shares, you can exchange, let's say that you need money to go from, maybe you're overweighted in the Israel fund and you need to go to a fixed income fund. Well, you can process an exchange so you're not subject to a sales commission. Now, you can't go from Vanguard or Fidelity or some type of loaded fund into the Timothy fund because they're different fund families. So that's one distinction to make. The other distinction, and I think what he's really getting at here, is they won't let him go from a C fund to an A fund. So, and the fund, the term fund is misused a little bit here. So it's C shares versus A shares. And the different types of shares just refer to the cost structure of the fund. So in an A share, it's known as a front-loaded fund, and you pay a sales charge or a commission to go into that share. Now, the internal expenses, because with mutual funds, you have internal expenses. Nothing's deducted from your account, but it's in the prospectus. The costs are taken out to pay the fund managers, transaction costs, all of the costs associated with running a mutual fund. They're lower in an A share than they are in a C share because a C share doesn't have an upfront sales charge. So if you purchase the C share, you didn't pay a commission going in, but your ongoing expenses are a little bit higher, which means that there's a little bit of a drag on the return when you compare it to an A share. Now, what happens after a long term, and you shouldn't really be buying mutual funds at all if you don't have a long-term time horizon, but your C share is actually going to convert into an A share after, I believe it's about 8 years.
Nice, Shannon. Next one here is Pete. He says, keep up the great work. He's 64 years old. Regarding E22, recently bought out E44. He says, I know you recommend that E44 investors hold onto their shares. We own way too much E44 and need to sell some shares to realign with the recommendations. Should we sell our excess shares now, just before E22 buys E44, the day they merge, right afterward, or shall we wait until the dust settles and sell when we will then be excess E22 shares? What do you think, Shannon, for Pete?
Yeah, so until a deal closes, there's always a chance that it won't happen. So what I would say is that if you're rebalancing right now, I would just hold off. If it's time to rebalance and you're grossly overweighted in either one of the positions, then you should go ahead and do it now. But I would wait until the deal closes and then take a look at that position and see what percentage it is, and then try to trim it back to the targeted amount. I think we're out of time.
I think we might be, yeah. Potentially squeeze a short one in, but it might be good for that partner to let them get a longer answer to the question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Well, folks, if you're listening to a station that only carries the short version of the show, we bid you a farewell and hope you have a wonderful day. If you want to catch the full show, go to financialissues.org/live or download the FISM app or catch us on your favorite podcast outlet, Apple or Spotify. For the rest of you, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back with more financial issues. Partners, don't miss the partner conference call today, noon Central Time. It will be posted to the website after that, so you can catch it if you can't catch it live. Don't go anywhere. We're taking a break. We'll be back. More financial issues coming. Hi, this is Shana Seth, the host of Financial Issues. The Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn logo. Save a baby, save a life.
Here at FISM News, our mission is to provide you with news from a source you can trust.
The news is a constant reminder that this world is not our home. It is marred by sin, resulting in wars, brokenness, and divisiveness.
Jesus promised that he will return soon to judge sin and make all things new.
Until then, we place our hope in him.
This is the good news, the most important truth we feel compelled to share.
I'm John.
I'm Debbie, and we're Samaritan members.
We have 8 children, ages from 30 down to 15, and we have a ministry called Family Man Ministries.
When he left the pastorate to start the ministry, we had no income for about a year potentially, and so we were living on almost nothing. The cost of health care seemed impossible because we had a big family. And so when I started researching ministries, there was no comparison. It was just the best deal. And so a year after we joined, my 10-year-old daughter at the time got pneumonia, and it was scary. Someone sent a card just to Maggie, and it said, not just that we're praying for you, but that God will always take care of you, and here's $5 for you to go out and get ice cream. It was just really special.
To make that connection, that's an amazing thing. I was sold on Samaritan Ministries. I just thought, okay, I'm a part of this.
I want to make a point. No matter what happens, I'll always be there for you.
I know.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, everybody. Great to be here with you today, June 19th. Hey, I want to remind you, as Shana mentioned in that last segment, we got a conference call today. Please mark your calendars, 12 Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. A little trick for you folks. Whenever you see, if you are a partner, whenever you see that email come in from Pat that has the phone number, save that phone number on speed dial. The access code will change every time, but the phone number is going to stay the same, to my understanding. So make sure that you have that phone number saved in your phone as you know, one of your contacts. You can do it for the same phone number that we use for the Bible study. Also, feel free to do that. But that's just something that you can do for the conference call. Make sure you join us today and check out Shana's commentary as well. We also saw a couple more additions to the buy list, which is great. So make sure you check that out today as soon as you can. You know what, folks? We were going to get to the markets here, but I can't wait any longer. I've got my dear friend Craig Haugaard is on the program with me. Craig has come through the first leg of his surgery that he had just a couple weeks ago, and I know so many of you have been praying for Craig, so it's great to have him back live on the program with me today. Craig Haugaard joins me. Craig, welcome back, buddy.
Well, thanks. It is a thrilled to hear your voice,
Yeah,
man.
likewise, man.
A great day.
We were just talking, folks, off the air. I mean, I'm not sure you realize how special this is. Every time Craig and I get to be on the air together, I mean, it's like a little slice of heaven. How's it get any better than this, man? It's just awesome.
It is truly a remarkable event, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. The brilliance is flowing, all that stuff. Craig, just to kind of start us off here, brother, I know you've been recovering a lot. Just give us an update. How are you doing after your surgery? How can we be praying for you?
You know, it went pretty well, and I don't, you know, what had happened was I'd had kind of a blockage in my urethra that was causing some really nasty bacterial infections that were attacking me, and so we had to go in and actually remove part of it, and then they rebuild it with flesh from inside your mouth, which you think about, it's an amazing surgery to think about what they can do, and obviously there's some pain and recovery involved with that, but it's gone very well. As I was shared before we went on the air, Seth, I actually ate real food for the first time in 2-3 weeks here last night, and so that's awesome. The mouth is healing up, and everything else is healing well also. So it'll be a 2-part surgery. So in December we'll get totally put back together. But I'm just thrilled to live in a time where they can do that surgery, because not that many years ago you would have just kind of had a painful existence, I guess, so it finished you off. But so I'm feeling really, really blessed, and awesome. Really do appreciate the prayer that's been offered up on my behalf. It's made a big difference. I think the doctors have been surprised with how quickly the recovery's gone and how well it's gone. So awesome. It's all very positive.
Yeah, great stuff, brother. Yeah, isn't it great eating real food? There's just nothing like it, you know. But in all seriousness, man, we are so grateful that you're doing well, and we just appreciate you and love you so much. And I appreciate all of your prayers, all of you listeners who lifted up Craig. We're so grateful to get to have him back, man. It's awesome. And Craig, tell me if I'm correct in this. I saw you sent me a text that you got your polar plunge license? Is that right?
Well, no, we did. We got our certificate. When we were down in Antarctica, we did a polar plunge, which was ridiculously cold and fairly stupid, but we did it, and now there's a certificate to commemorate that wonderful event.
That's awesome. That's awesome. See, we have a superhero in our midst here, folks. Craig Haugaard, polar plunge master, ag report master, surgery master, all that stuff, man. It's great. Hey, let's get to our ag conversation, brother. Let's kind of pick up from our last time. We were talking about the bird flu. There's this, kind of on the fringes a little bit. We're starting to hear a little more news of it. The latest news we saw, I think you sent me something a couple weeks ago about there was the first reported human death in Mexico related to the bird flu. What can you tell us?
Correct.
What do we need to know about this?
Well, obviously the death in Mexico was somewhat alarming. Here in the U.S., we've continued to see it spread among dairy herds, and it's now been found in 94 herds in 12 states. We've had 4 people in the U.S. infected with bird flu. One of them was back in 2022 as working in poultry. The last 3 have been this year, and they've all been in association with dairy cattle. We had one in Texas and a couple of them in Michigan. The last one in Michigan was here probably about 3 weeks ago now. And that was the first one that really had kind of the classic symptoms of a lot of respiratory distress and that type of thing that came with it. The previous 3 in the U.S. have been fairly mild. So that continues to spread. And they're really not quite sure how it went from the birds into the cattle. They're trying to track it. The theory is that a wild bird, migratory birds, infected a cow in Texas. And some cattle from Texas then were shipped up to a dairy in Michigan, and I think that's how it got to Michigan, and probably how it's spreading to other states too, is people buy and sell cattle and move them around. But when you look at kind of the overall, this thing really started to kick up in 2022, and I think you're right. It feels like we've been kind of ahead of the curve on talking about this on this program, but since 2022 here in the U.S., we've had 14 million turkeys and 80 million chickens that have had to be destroyed as a result of bird flu getting in the flocks, and 71 million of those chickens were egg-laying chickens. So we've in the past talked about the impact it's had on egg prices as well. And so that's obviously, you talk about 94 million birds total here in the U.S. that have had to be euthanized. It's a pretty big impact.
Absolutely. So you got bird flu, you got inflation. I can imagine we're starting to see why, and I can even Craig, I'm even thinking about when we had you on. It was probably really started talking a lot about the increase in egg prices. I think we're starting to see why. Obviously we got inflation, but we also got this bird flu. You said 94 million chickens. That's a big impact.
Well, yeah, and 71 million of those were birds that lay eggs.
Yeah.
So you eliminate 71 million producing birds. There's going to be a pretty big drop off in egg production in that case. And
absolutely.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. We're seeing the impact of that. Now, the other thing that listeners might be wondering about is if we're getting, bird flu showing up in dairy, what does that do to the safety of the milk that we're drinking?
Yeah. It's a good question.
And, in fact, when the FDA has done some studies where they're going to grocery stores and buy milk and test it, and they're finding traces of the virus in that milk. But the virus that they're finding is dead. And so right now, in fact, they think that it's in about 20% of the nation's milk supply. The theory is that the pasteurization process is killing off that virus. And so as long as you're drinking pasteurized milk, it appears that it's a safe product. I've continued to drink it daily, and I don't have any fears with that.
Sure.
If you're a person that drinks raw milk, I'd be a little concerned about that.
Yeah.
And if you're, so to me, that's the big, probably would be something I would avoid. There's been some cases where kittens on a dairy have drank raw milk and then have died from the bird flu. So,
oh, wow.
But if it's going through the pasteurization process, I still feel comfortable about the safety of that product, I guess.
Craig, that's great to know, man. That's not even something that I would have thought on my radar, but that's really good. Just kind of a follow-up for you. How does this transition to humans? Like, is it through if they were to consume raw milk or some other product that was like already impacted by it? How does that work?
Yeah, the fear is that could spread that way. There haven't been any cases in the U.S. of that happening.
Yeah.
I mean, the 4 people who have contracted bird flu have been very actively involved. The first one, poultry, the person that got the bird flu was in the process of euthanizing the birds in a flock that had been infected. And then the other 3, obviously, were working very, very closely with cattle that had been infected with the bird flu. And so I'm not sure what the transmission mode was there, but there's been nothing to indicate that it's made the leap through the food chain at this point. But certainly the fear is that happen, and so it's something we continue to watch.
Absolutely. Strange news indeed, Craig, but that's why we got you here, brother. I appreciate that so much. Hey, with the little time that we have left, Craig, what else do we need to know today, brother, in terms of the ag world? What else is going on?
The biggest thing right now, I think, is we're really into the growing season, particularly for corn and soybeans. And it's really it's turned into a weather market. We're seeing pretty good rains in the upper plains and the western corn belt for the next 5 days. It looks like that crop is going to be in really good shape. The eastern corn belt, it's going to be below normal rainfall for the next 15 days, and then we get back to kind of normal. And so it's kind of a tug of war. Are we going to do enough damage to the eastern corn belt to rally this market, or is the good weather conditions in the western corn belt going to kind of offset it? So far, crop ratings look really good. Corn crop right now is rated at 72% good to excellent. I think the 5-year average is 64%. So a better than normal looking crop right now. And on beans, we're at 70% good to excellent. That's, I think, 64% there as well on the 5-year average. So crops looking good. Wheat harvests, we're harvesting the winter wheat right now. I think we're about 27% harvested, I believe, on winter wheat, which is ahead of the average there as well. And we're seeing a few quality issues, but generally pretty good yields and nothing quality that scares me at this point, I guess.
Excellent. Craig, a pleasure as always, my brother. Thank you for coming on the program with me, brother. We'll keep on praying for you, and I look forward to the next time. Folks, that's Craig Haugaard with the Ag Report. You can catch the Ag Report on our program every day during the third segment. Make sure that you catch it on financialissues.org, of course, where you can get all of our programs as well. We'll be right back after this break.
In a world where financial decisions can feel overwhelming, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters. But what if there is a way to align your financial goals with your deepest values? Financial Issues has helped us navigate the complex world of finance through a biblical lens. By prioritizing and investing in a way that honors God, Financial Issues has empowered us to focus on what truly matters: our family, our faith, and our future. With Financial Issues by our side, we can invest knowing that our financial decisions are in line with our values. Take the first step today and become a Financial Issues partner to access rich online resources, training tools, and guidance for biblically responsible investing. Head over to financialissues.org and learn how to invest your money in a way that honors God. That's financialissues.org.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Great to be here with you, folks. June 19th, 2024. Hope you enjoyed that interview with Craig. It was great to have him back with me on the program. I missed getting to hear his voice, and I trust that you all enjoyed getting to hear him live as well. And we do just appreciate the prayers of the FISM family so very much. Thank you very much for those. Let's get to the markets here while we have time. Yesterday, the indices kind of muted throughout the day. Not much of note in the markets, other than there was a big story that NVIDIA surpassed Microsoft as now the single most valuable publicly traded company on Wall Street. If you remember, a couple weeks ago, I think it was, we saw NVIDIA pass, I believe it was Apple, to become the second most valuable company. It passed that $3 trillion market cap value mark, and it just passed $3.33 trillion in market cap to surpass Microsoft and become the single most valuable publicly traded company out there right now. The shares of the giant, they're up right around 170% this year. So just continuing to boom here. This is just my personal opinion. I would not be surprised to see a little bit of a downtick from NVIDIA simply because there's going to be sell-offs. There always are in the markets for sure. It probably won't be much. And again, I'm not looking to do a crystal ball or anything. It's just going by what the market does, ebbs and flows. So don't be surprised if you do see that. But that did happen yesterday. That was the big story. Because of that, the markets were able to finish relatively positive a little bit. The Dow was up 0.1%, roughly. The S&P 500 was up 0.25% and finished at another record level, as it's been hitting a lot of records lately. And the NASDAQ barely above the flat line, so a winning day for all three major indices. The 10-year Treasury yield was actually down quite a bit yesterday to 4.2% at the close. Right now, the 10-year Treasury is hanging around that number, actually slightly less than it was yesterday. Meanwhile, oil finished yesterday up a little bit. It's up over $80 a barrel, actually up over $81 a barrel at the close yesterday. Currently, it's creeping up towards $82 a barrel. So that's what oil is looking like right now. Pre-markets this morning were relatively muted, and they've opened in that way as well. Let me just make sure that I'm seeing the most up-to-date numbers here, and it's looking like it. Yep. So the Dow Jones everything. Actually, you know what, folks? Here's what I'm realizing. I'm seeing the same numbers from yesterday. The markets are closed today because it is the government-created holiday of Juneteenth. So that is why we're not seeing movement from the markets today. We won't see any movement today because, again, they are closed for that. So that's what we're looking like right there in the markets. Great to see so many of you on the chat. I love seeing the corn conversation there. I thought that was awesome, seeing you all doing some homesteading. Megan and I are trying our hand at that as well. It's really good. But I saw Claude and Eddie talking about how you guys are growing your corn. I think that's really cool. So keep that up for sure. Let's get to some partner questions. Actually, before we do that, there's a headline I wanted to share with you all. The headline is this: the IRS plans to close major tax loopholes used by wealthy Americans. So the IRS and Treasury Department on Monday announced a plan to close a tax loophole for wealthy Americans known as partnership basis shifting. It's a transaction that allows individuals and companies to operate through different legal entities in order to make more deductions to minimize taxes owed. Now, the Treasury said that this move would generate as much as $50 billion in tax revenue over the next 10 years. IRS Commissioner Danny Warfel said, quote, these tax shelters allow wealthy taxpayers to avoid paying what they owe. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said in a statement that the, quote, proposed rules will increase tax fairness and reduce the deficit. Very interesting here, folks. Here's why I brought this up. Let me first say, I'm not a tax professional by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm all for paying fair taxes as well. I think that's a good thing. You've heard me mention on the show before that there are few things that are good reasons to pay taxes. Protection for military, infrastructure, legal protection at home, those sorts of things, they're all good. And that's all based in Romans 13, that we should submit to the governing authorities. That said, it seems to me that the powers that be in this country, which includes the current leadership over the IRS, has painted a target on the backs of the rich. And they're trying to do this in a way that they claim is to distribute the wealth in this country and make everybody equal. We talk about this idea of equity, that everyone should have equal outcomes, according to the current administration. You've heard Shana mention that a lot. The way that they do it is to levy heavy taxes on the rich. The problem that they're failing to see with this, folks, is that the rich provide so much good for those in lower economic classes. Now, I'm not trying to unhealthily justify wealth. I think wealth brings with it a flurry of dangers as well. The scripture talks often about these, but I also think that it is good for a society to have wealthy people, especially when those wealthy people are also generous people. And I believe there are many, many out there. Many wealthy people are also generous people. And that is the best way that you can be wealthy. If you're also generous, that's the best way to manage that wealth, and that's wonderful. And these folks fail to see the good that comes. So many jobs are created by wealthy people so that average Joes like myself, middle-class people, can provide for my family. That's a really good thing. And there are millions of people like me who have benefited because someone wealthier than I hired me and can afford to pay me a salary. These jobs benefit the economy as a whole, but rather than allowing the private sector to do what it should, and that starts with hardworking CEOs, big government sadly is now looking to fulfill that role by reaching its arms in and redistributing the wealth for everyone and taking power away from wealthy CEOs. And really what it is, speaking of power, it is just a grab for power. It's all this is. And so I believe that, to have a healthy society, we do need wealthy people. We understand there's spiritual dangers that come with wealth. I am not one that believes at all in justification by poverty. I think there are many wealthy people in glory today because they understood that wealth is not the end, that there's something greater, that there's spiritual wealth, treasure in Christ. But we also have to understand that, it's good to have wealthy people in a society, and it's good for them to be able to create jobs and hire people and create businesses. It's a great benefit. Just wanted to share that with you folks. Let's get to a partner question here now. Grant, what do we have from Claude in Louisiana?
All right, we have from Claude primarily a question about how will a Trump election win affect markets?
That's a good question, Claude. Yeah, what effect will the markets have if Trump were to win? We got a similar question, Claude, actually, from several years ago. Dan addressed this with a few Trump tweets that kind of ended up moving the markets. I'd actually like to play this clip for you right now, and then with the time we have left, we'll share some insight on it. Here's Dan Celia talking about this exact topic.
What makes the stock market change just about every second. Earlier today, you mentioned that President Trump sent a tweet that gave the markets optimism. So I'm just wondering who takes those tweets or the news, whether it's good or bad news, and integrate that to the stock markets in order for the stock markets to change just about every second.
So the stock market is based on one thing that makes a change, only one thing. And that is, well, two things, buying or selling. That's it. So if the president comes out like he did today and says, yeah, we're going to try to get this bill passed. We got to fight. We got to get it done. We got to move along. That's stimulus to the economy. Stimulus to the economy is good for the economy, right? It's going to help out companies. It's going to help out people. It's going to people will have a little bit more money to spend. That's going to help out stocks and companies. So that ushers in a little bit of enthusiasm. People start buying, and the market goes up. When he says, like he did yesterday, stop the negotiations with Nancy Pelosi, just forget it. We're not doing that anymore. Let's get away from that. That is saying, wow, things are going to have to stand on their own. I'm not sure whether they can. And I'm a little concerned because the stimulus that the Federal Reserve says we need coming out of Congress and other central banks said has to happen is not going to happen now. So now I'm concerned. So I think I'll start selling some things and position myself for that. That's what drives the market. It isn't anything else, but it's those things. It is the assumption of whether things are going to get a little worse overall in the economy or a little bit better. Now, having said that, I will say this, Caleb. You and I should pay very little attention to that. I talk about it often because I feel obligated to, but it's none of it what President Trump said yesterday that was negative for the markets and what he said last night that was positive for the markets today, to me personally, I'm talking about, is totally irrelevant. I'm not going to make any moves in my portfolio based on any of that. And if you're a long-term investor, you know, people aren't going to react to that. The problem with Wall Street is the majority of the Wall Streeters and the big institutionals, they're not investors, they're traders. So they're constantly trading. They're looking for that 10 cents a share upward because they're trading $1 million or 1 million shares. They're traders, and those traders are driving the market. It's not traders like you and I driving the market. But we don't care about those things because we get in and we stay in. It's a very different atmosphere that we have compared to what they have.
So, Claude, to answer that question, kind of to bring Dan's wisdom into your question for the day, I think a Trump win would affect the markets in one way or the other. Common sense seems to tell me that a Trump win could be quite good for the markets because it'd be a signal of a potentially strong economic future. But there's no guarantee of that. I mean, we've been seeing the markets rising pretty constantly during the midst of the Biden administration while the economy is not in that good of a position here. So there are a lot of factors to it, brother. I think the thing we have to remember, as Dan said in that clip, the markets are driven by short-term traders, and they're driven by buying and selling. And our strategy, while we do partake in buying and selling, we don't partake in short-term traders. So what I want you to do, Claude, is be confident to stick with the strategy regardless of the outcome. Because remember, it's long-term, and we're planning for long past the results of this 2024 election to be able to still be in the markets for that long-term growth that's so core to our strategy. Claude, I hope that was helpful for you, brother. Great show, folks. It was good to be with you. God willing, we'll do it again tomorrow. Remember, it's all his. Let's be found good and faithful stewards. God bless.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.